On Sunday, I lined up against some of the best athletes in the world. On Monday, I woke up a stroke survivor. So where do we start? Do we start with 7-month-old Kadeena, who hid under a table, scaring her mum half to death because until that point, she didn't know I could walk? Or do we go to 4-year-old Kadeena, who was obsessed with dance and learning about her Caribbean culture through that? Sport has been such a big thing in my life. Sports was my life. Sport is my life. Because of that, I took a path to going into physiotherapy at Manchester Metropolitan University. I started out as a sports scholar and enjoyed learning with other people and being able to be involved as a part of the sports scholar program. I super enjoyed being in the power room gym, which was something that became a really massive part of my rehab. It was in the spring of 2014 when I was doing my neurology module that I started feeling some weird symptoms, but I kind of brushed it off because other than my late night trips to get a milkshake, I was a relatively healthy athlete. I headed down to a local competition, and when I got there, I got out of the car and had what I thought was just a dead leg. So I saw a physio and cracked on with my racing. I managed to do 2 races, but something just didn't feel right. I couldn't move my leg properly, I had no coordination, and I couldn't drive out of the blocks. I just knew something wasn't right. But I got in the car, spent a lot of time on the cat side driving back, had a massive headache, but just assumed I was dehydrated. It was then when I got up the next morning, I had right-sided weakness and dysarthria, which is speech disturbance. So I walked myself to the GP, who then sent me straight to the hospital. Luckily, both of them were around the corner. It was then that I was told that I'd had a stroke. My world came crumbling down. Everything crumbled around me. I thought my life was over. But it was at that point that I realized from the crumbling was about to come a rise. The next day, I had a sleepless night, and I woke up the next day to an email from UK Sport who wanted me to be on the next phase of the talent transfer program into skeleton, which is the really crazy thing you do when you slide down the ice on something like a tea tray with your chin a couple of centimetres from the ice. I decided that I was going to push for that, and my physio that came that morning, I asked her if I was able to do that in 7 weeks' time. Which she wasn't sure about, but I spent the next 3 weeks pestering her every day to have physio sessions, so I'm sure she was glad to see the back of me when I left. However, I then spent every morning at 7 a.m. in the clinic being strapped into a treadmill, which is the way I started running, and after 11 weeks I was able to get through to not just the first phase, but all the way through to the 4th phase, at which point I had to then declare my medical history and was unable to continue. But I'd gained back my zeal, I'd gained back my drive, and I really wanted to get back into the life of sport. Unfortunately, being my life, that wasn't meant to be. And one day I woke up with the burning sensation, the size of a 50p piece in my forearm. That spread from just that spot in my arm to throughout my arm. That day, my mum said to me, "Kadeena, maybe we should go to the hospital tomorrow," because I was heading to university that weekend. I woke up that Thursday morning and had burning and tingling from my head, from my neck downwards, which I later found out was dystonia, uncoordinated movement. We called the ambulance and I went to the hospital, and they wanted to dismiss it as post-stroke symptoms. However, by chance, they called through to a different hospital, and the consultant that answered the phone that day happened to be a specialist in the condition I later was diagnosed with. I remember those words coming out of his mouth like it was yesterday. They're etched into my brain. "We think you have MS." That was a gut punch. I'd bounced back from one thing already, but this was going to be so much harder. It was going to be a real tough time trying to get back from this, but I was going to use my sport to help me to bounce back. So the next day I decided I was going to set up a fundraiser. Sport took a back seat, however, because for the next few weeks I was unable to do anything, needing my mum to help me with everything. She became my rock. She had to help me with my personal care. She had to help me with getting my food. I think her personal favourite was having to shave my legs. But she helped me with everything, and she helped me to get through this phase. After I decided that I was going to do a competition, and that was on the 4th of January, I was diagnosed on the 20th of September. So after a few weeks of being housebound, I had 2.5 months to get myself ready to do a race. It was horrendous, but it was a benchmark and it was a start. Because of the balance and coordination issues I had, I wasn't able to run so much as I wanted because I kept falling over. So I was just in the gym with my strength and conditioning coach in the power room, and we just were doing movement stuff and helping me to regain strength. He just suggested that I got on the bike because the furthest I could fall was just to the floor at the side of me. So I did some watt bike sessions, and after a few weeks, we realized that I had pretty decent powers. So he said, well, why not reconsider a talent transfer again? I wasn't able to do skeleton, and the options I was given were canoeing and track cycling. I can't swim, so canoeing was kind of out of the window. So track cycling it was, and luckily it was in the city I was doing my university at was where British Cycling were based. So I got involved with cycling. That year, I spent doing my academic studies alongside doing 2 sports at an elite level and trying not to let either sport know how much of the other sport I was doing, until I was then selected for the World Championships in the September of 2014, and cycling then found out that I was doing quite a bit of athletics. I was then told that I had to make a decision about which sport I wanted to do. Reluctantly, I chose cycling because I was really struggling with athletics at the time. Having done athletics prior, I felt stressed and just really like I was comparing myself against pre-MS Kadeena, and I just didn't feel like it was a great thing for me to continue that mentally. And seeing as though they'd said that no one can do 2 sports at an elite level, I decided I'd just do cycling. I then went to the World Championships, and it was all my dreams wrapped up in one. I went out there, and in the first round, I ran a world record, which was unreal. I then backed that up in the final, equaling that time and becoming world champion. It was literally the perfect championships. Other than getting disqualified the next day for not turning up to my race, everything else was perfect. And I found my love for the sport again. It was at that point I decided that I wasn't going to let my MS define me, I wasn't going to let anyone else define me, and I was going to come back and take control of my life. So I decided I was going to push to do 2 sports. I had a cycling event when I got back 2 weeks later, so I decided that that was my point to show everyone what I could do. I went out and did a race I was actually quite disappointed with, but it was a world lead. So I sat on my bike cooling down, contemplating whether it had gone well or not, and my coach came down with a message from UK Sport that said she can do what she wants. So that's where Kadeena T-Sport Cox arose. I learned about resilience and perseverance that year. So what does this mean to me? Choose to not give up. Sounds easier said than done, but only you can make that first step, so you have to choose to not give up. Having targets and manageable goals, these are the things that will keep you focused, and when things are seeming like they're out of your control, you have these things to focus on. Be flexible and adaptable. Things change, the world changes, life is up and down, so sometimes you just have to look at things from a different angle. The shop window. When you look at me or you see what I've done, you think, she's a world champion, she's a world record holder, she's a Paralympic champion, and it all seems great. But I have multiple sclerosis, and that comes in peaks and troughs, just like life does. And sometimes you can't anticipate what's going to come and when it's going to come. So for me, I've had to learn how to combat these highs and lows and how to bounce back and how to be a beacon of light in these moments where everything else around me is dark. In the times when I'm passing out from the pain, in the times when I'm feeling like everything is out of my control, I have to rise up. 2016 was a turbulent year. Because of categories in disability sport, where you compete in a category, so it's fair for everyone within that classification. However, in 2016, mine changed, and that made it challenging for me going into the Paralympic Games. I had to go back to an event I hated, the 400 meters, but it was an opportunity for me to get a gold medal. So I went to the Paralympic Games, and in my first round, as a Paralympian novice, I went out and did a half-second PB, which eventually got me my first medal, a bronze medal in the 100 meters. I then went on to cool down on my bike at the athletic track, so I got a lot of funny looks, but it was because the next morning I had my 500 meter time trial in the velodrome. I rode the race of a lifetime, and I broke my own world record and became Paralympic champion in that event. And that was when I realized I'd got 2 medals in 2 different sports, so I was over the moon. A couple of days went by, and then I had to do the dreaded event in the 400 meters. the first 300 meters are easy. And then I realized coming into that home straight that I was in third place. And I don't know how I managed to get there, where I got the will from. Maybe it was the echoes of people telling me that I can't do things and I can't do this and I can't do that allowed me to drive down that home straight. And there was so much relief that came over me when 10 meters from the line, I saw that I was pulling away and I became world record holder and Paralympic champion in another event. I then went on the next day to get a silver medal in the relay. And just to top things off, I became the flag bearer for the closing ceremony, which was an absolute honour. So how have I managed to get to this point, and why am I telling you this story about myself? The reason I tell you this is because I have an analogy, which is flipping the switch. And that, for me, means turning a negative into a positive. And yes, there are a lot of situations where we're not in control and things feel, hard, but we can flip the switch on that. And how can you turn that into a positive? And for me, that means I knew I was going to be different and I was going to be a Paralympian, but I was going to do that in 2 sports and make history. That's not done in Olympic or Paralympic sport, definitely not at the same time. Realizing that there's more to life than just sport. For me, sport has always been my life, but I was able to turn that around and use it to empower someone. And then I lost a lot of friends during that time, and that felt really hard as a 23-year-old. But I've now realized that sometimes having a few friends is a lot better than having a lot of not so good friends. This result did not illustrate the backstory. So for me, I am 5-time world champion, 4-time Paralympic champion, 5-time world record breaker, yet still my most impressive to me moment was my 4th finish place at the Paralympic Games in Tokyo. And this was because I was unable to run for 3 months prior to that moment. I had spent the best part of 2.5 months running on this beautiful thing, the alter-gravity treadmill, because I'd gained a calf tear in one leg and then moved on to having Achilles tendonitis in both legs. So I went down to the track every single session and would try run and then would walk away crying, until the point where my head coach said, we need to stop this. If she gets to the championships in one piece physically, she won't be in one piece mentally. So we decided that we were going to use the Alter-G treadmill, and that was going to be how I was going to do my training. It wasn't until the week of my qualification that I was able to actually run on the track. And in my first race, I ran halfway and lost my head, which I've never done, and decided to pull out. I was on track for making the time I needed to do. And then on the final chance to qualify, I did the race and ran probably one of the worst races of my life. So I didn't think I was going to get qualification. But on the Monday, my phone rang, and after waiting by the phone all day, I thought I was going to be told no. But my head coach says, you owe me chocolate and wine, you've been selected. And for the second time, I was being selected for 2 different sports at the same time. Now, I say that because, life always gives you hurdles. And for me, having MS, it's really up and down all the time. But throughout Rio, I was told that people said that my motto was Carpe Diem. And this was because I decided with MS, I'm just going to live every moment at a time and push for every moment, live in all the bits that not everyone would want to do. I did a show called The Jump, which is a little bit crazy. I'd never skied. I was going to learn to ski and ski jump at the same time. But why not? Because I've got MS and I might not be able to walk tomorrow. So that's the way I live my life. But Carpe Diem isn't my motto. My motto is a little bit more, never give up, just adapt to the waves. That's it.